Okay, what I thought I'd do today is talk to you about our messages from the SkillSet stand over on 34 there, which is about do less training, do more learning. And particularly what I want to focus on is the induction part of learning, because the first 90 days are really important. In fact, the first 90 days of somebody's induction can be the difference to whether they stay in the organization or to whether they actually will take on change. So my name's Tim Marshall. I am a learning consultant from SkillSet, and I've been involved in learning and development for around about 14 odd years or so. And I've been lucky enough to be involved in both instructional design, involved in management and soft skills training, but equally to be involved in psychometrics. And I don't know if anybody knows their Myers-Briggs, but I am always looking for the ultimate fix. I'm always looking to find the best way to help people to learn more efficiently and more effectively. And that's what I want to talk to you about today, about doing that. First of all, though, what I really want to start with is a little experiment. So no internal groans, please. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through a number of different messages, and I'm going to find out what's your level of retention, your level of recall. So where to find some messages? Well, my sales director has asked me to kindly crowbar in some sales messages. And funny enough, on your left-hand side, we have a number of sales messages. So what I'm going to do is briefly take you through those messages and tell you what they mean, and then find out whether you can recall them. Oh, the test of training. So the first message that we've got here is less upfront training, more productivity. So what we're looking at here is actually putting less training at the initial part of induction and actually putting more of the learning into the latter stages of somebody's induction process, which would be through performance support. So we actually work with TTS on a product called TT Guide, and TT Guide is an excellent form of live application training. So that's that one, remember it. Next, we've got less formal reading, more engagement. I don't know if you're like me. I don't tend to read stuff. I tend to use the button on the help that reads it for me. But this is, in essence, a message that says, what about undertaking things like e-learning? Okay, yes, what about undertaking webinars, etc.? We've then got less risk, more control. With this, what I'm talking about is one of our other partners that we work with, which is Net Dimensions. And actually, they provide an excellent LMS service, which then is excellent, particularly good on the compliance side. So this is actually making sure that you, as an organization, have the control and the measures in place that actually will meet all of your compliant needs. We've then got less classroom and more retention. And again, you may have heard quite a few messages today around social, mobile, those types of learning. And this is about using those types of technologies to find a different application in which to learn. And last of all, less generic material and more targeting. Now, we are predominantly a training consultancy. So yes, we work with partners, but in essence, we work with people and organizations. We talk to them about their particular needs and about maximizing their potential with actually the latest technology that's available. So there's some messages. What do you reckon? Do you reckon, and I'd like a show of hands, whether you could actually relay back all 5 messages to me? So a show of hands, all 5 messages. Okay, good, a couple. Who, as we went through, actually got some of the messages and then started to switch off? Okay, thank you for being honest, good. Okay, who Who actually didn't get any of it, really? They couldn't tell you any of it, couldn't remember it. Hands up. Okay. And who doesn't want to put their hands up? Yeah, okay, that's the rest of you. This is not about recall. This is about motivation. If you're motivated to pick up those messages, if you take the initiative, you will actually listen, you will actually write it down, you will actually engage with it. If you're not, then you're not going to learn. And what happens within training departments is that we actually force feed people learning. We give them blocks of learning and say, there you go, digest it. And in actual fact, what we want from them is a bit of pull. We actually want them to actually say, give me that piece of learning. So these are some of the considerations that I'm just going to cover through. And they're topics that touch across the top of, well, just the top of many different topics, really. Firstly, we've got from push to pull. Z generation learning. Who's come across Z generation learning? Yeah, good, good. Some challenges in there. Learning at the point of need. Again, another message you might have heard quite a lot of. And, you know, quite an important one. The 70-20-10 rule, you will have heard of that today, I'm pretty sure. And lastly, training planning. And I want to touch on training planning because I want to challenge your thinking today with how your training departments think about learning. Now, when I decided to write this seminar, I actually, for years, I've done induction training. It's a particular interest of mine, and I thought, well, I might be a little bit out of touch. So I actually contacted a colleague of mine just to check whether it's still the same. And she told me about her experience with her teams, etc. But one of the interesting things was the story she told me about her daughter. And her daughter went on a training session, on an induction training, and sat observing somebody else on the computer processing all the different processes and just watching for 2 weeks. Now that is one hell of a pull on that. It's a whole 2 weeks just observing, not doing anything. And again, they actually left after 2 weeks. They'd have had enough. And if you're inducting people in that way, what does that tell them about your organization? What does it tell them about how you're going to manage change in the future? Like it or lump it. So these are some concepts I'd just like you to think about from push to pull. So training is what we push on them. Learning is what we, ideally as individuals, pull. So training occurs in spurts. It happens, we leave it for a while, they go back on the job, and then it happens again. Learning is an ongoing process. In fact, you get it from everywhere. You take the time to actually look out, find something that interests you, you will go and learn it. Training is generally linear, so it's provided for you in one direction. Learning can be engaged in many different ways. This is important. Training tends to be about the group needs. You know, if we took a poll here of everybody how you like to learn, what's the betting that those needs will be particularly different? Whereas learning is definitely about your unique needs, how you like to learn. Training, well, apart from a day at the office, it's mostly a chore for people. Whereas learning is that desire. You've got to want to do it. Training is something that happens at work. Learning, yeah, that can happen anywhere, anytime. And as you've seen today with the many different technologies on view, actually, you know, whether it's mobile learning, it's learning you take off the internet, there's many different sources for it. Training is about the organization, learning is about the person. And training it's about the trainer being engaging. It's about me as a trainer actually being engaging, good style, good methodology. And if I don't deliver, then you can sit back and say, well, it's the trainer's fault. This is where we've got to change the actual paradigm. People are there to learn, particularly in an organization. They are being paid to do a job. And we need to actually give them more of a challenge. Yes, support them along the way, but give them a challenge for their own learning. Take ownership. So the last part there, like I say, if it's good or bad, the onus can be on the trainer. If it's good or bad for the learner, well, it's whether they actually pass the requirements of a course, actually meet the requirements of the job role. I borrowed this off a colleague because I thought it was quite a useful diagram to look at the actual dynamic of training versus learning, how it's actually changing. And what you see here is that the dotted line is actually more traditional training. We tend to lump it, for induction, lump it all up front. Go on, eat all of this big pie of information. Okay, now try and digest it over the next few weeks. And eventually people get to this happy point where they can start to learn. What we're looking at with do less training, do more learning, is actually making this a flatter area. So you've got less peaks and troughs. And the idea is perhaps take away some of this block of induction training and move it across into more learning and more performance support as well. Just a few things to think about. Now, I love this. This is not the actual Brazilian riot police. This is looking at gamification. And me putting that up there seems to suggest that it's the be-all and end-all. Yeah, it looks very exciting. Whether you could learn something like the 7 C's of consultancy from it, I don't know, while shooting a zombie in the head. It has its place, but it needs to be part of a blended solution. It needs to be part of the strategy, otherwise it sits differently. What it does highlight, though, is that actually technology is changing. Technology is moving things forward, getting us to look at things in a different way. I even thought about films like in 1982, Blade Runner was produced. And that suggests a world that was set in 2019. So being after not this World Cup, the next World Cup, we'll all be flying around in cars with synthetics. Technology does move forward, but it still means that we actually still need to retain some of those classroom elements. It's not about ditching it, it's about using it in a different way. So Gen Z. You met these guys? We've had our baby boomers, our Gen X, Gen Y. Who are our Gen Z? These guys are really tech savvy. These are our current crop of people that are attached to their mobile phone, their device, their iPad. Everything's up in the cloud, and they are consumers of information, knowledge from everywhere. So they tend to learn at any time, whenever they like. And it tends to be in small bite-sized chunks. It tends to be pick something up, done, okay, I'll come back to that a bit later. These guys like fast delivery, nice and snappy. They like things that are interactive, definitely. They like useful graphics to engage. They like quick content. They like to be able to use social media to share their ideas and their thoughts on content. And one of the biggest challenges is these guys are definitely digital. So if you've got analog trainers that are trying to deliver classroom training in an old format, these guys will switch off quick. Now, that's not to say that everybody these days has suddenly turned into Gen Z. However, we do have a sort of a multi-network type society now. So more and more people are getting into their technology, are using it for their benefit. And lastly, these guys need something active, something to keep them going, something immediate. You know, learning at the point of need is far more interesting to them. So there are many different sort of concepts about learning at the point of need. The first one is around mobile learning. So as mentioned with our Gen Zs, actual mobile learning is ubiquitous. It's always with us. The phone's always there. We can always grab it. The iPad's close by. We can get that information. We can also share where we are when we get that information. We can be doing the job. We can be in the warehouse if it's warehouse training. It could be anywhere. There's me enjoying the tunes. So mobile learning at the point of need. When you need something, it's to hand. Social learning is becoming more and more important. As you'll see in a moment with the 70-20-10 rule, is actually part of this social learning is a network that will support you in actually taking your information and embedding it. And whether that's through coaching, through mentoring, through action learning sets, through peer group development, so referrals, social learning, this sort of social aspect is all important. Now there is social learning online as well, and making bigger communities, doing very similar jobs, whether that's internal in the organization or even on the big scale of the wider group. And last of all is performance support. So when you're in the application, when you've got that task to hand that you need to complete, and you have that brain freeze, I don't know about you, but sometimes when I'm writing a word, I get to the point and think, is that how you spell the word? And it can be something very simple, and I'm unsure. What the actual performance support is there to guide you is to say, I need help. Can you give me a hand, please? And we work with TTS on a product called TT Guide, and that provides an icon on your desktop that says, if you're in the middle of processing your expenses and you forget how the system works, you can ask. And it will come up with a list of criteria to say, what are you trying to do? And you'll say, I want to get my expenses paid. I want to get my money back. And you can actually select that item. You can actually then follow through and be guided like a sat-nav through the application until you've performed the function. Now, it's a bit like how you find information at the moment. Many of us don't actually just, when we've got a challenge, like got to fix a tile, or we want to know how to upload a song onto Rocksmith, what we might do is we'd probably go onto Google or YouTube. When we found that resource, we watch it up until the point that we've got the answer, then we switch it off. There's no point watching the rest of it. So this is where performance support's ideal. It can give you that ongoing context and make sure that you actually follow through, complete your task, and then put it away. But it's still going in. It's still a form of learning. And in fact, we can take performance support one step further. We can actually utilize it within a training environment. So rather than actually giving people a block of work, a block of training to do, we can set them tasks within like an induction point, being able to say, okay, off you go. Here's a task. I want you to complete the process. You may have done a little bit of learning in between hand, but you actually have a go at completing the task on your own. If you get stuck, the learning support's there. So you've probably heard quite a lot about 70-20-10. So 70%, the theory says that 70% of the time, you know, ideally, while you're doing the job, you're getting the learning. You're getting the learning, you're getting the answer. It's like the referral point. 20% is reinforcement of your learning. It's actually using your social networks. It's using your coaches, using your mentors. And this is how I see going forward that training departments will start to evolve. Sorry? %10 retention rate. Yes, well, yes, formal learning. Yeah, definitely. Sorry, I hadn't quite got onto that, but good lead in. So the 10% is the formal learning. That doesn't disappear. So we still need the classroom, but we need to actually change its utilization. We need to make sure that classroom-based training is actually more about application and consolidation of knowledge. I don't know about you, but one of the biggest times that I've learned something is having a go at it, particularly in the public arena where the blood starts draining from my face. I tend to get a lot of learning at that point. I tend to think, yeah, I know I'm not going to do that again. So yes, there is a space for classroom training, and it's how we use it. So this is about a paradigm shift. Okay, so we've got this slide, developing learning plans. So what I'm talking about here is actually moving the training department's function about providing just training. What I'm advocating is actually training departments take a step back and look at what they're seeking to achieve. Rather than force feeding people information, and let's face it, I've done quite a few inductions in the past, and my learners and I get to a point in those inductions where I just go, I'm full up, I can't move forward. And that's because I haven't given them a choice about how they want to learn. I've imposed my way on them. You can give them activities, you can give them games, you can give them quizzes. At the same time, the ownership should be with them to say how they want to do things. They want to spend most of their time reading. Lots of people consolidate themselves in that way. So the new training plan, and this is one of change, which can become uncomfortable, is for departments to have a more holistic approach to training. So this is looking at competencies and say, what do these people need to do by the end? What do they need to achieve? Which of those items do we need, which of those pathways do we need to lead them down? Which of those gateways do we need to see them through? So this is where we can actually provide a platform of learning opportunities, learning objects in whatever form they might be, and actually provide this platform allowing people to pick and choose the way in which they do things, and then provide a gateway to check that that learning, that application of learning has been taken on board. Equally, in a compliant type of zone, you might actually use those gateways to actually check that learning's been achieved and closed off. Yes, leverage the use of performance support. So use more of that learning on the job, but equally use it within a training environment. Expand the mediums for access, so the different types of mediums. Some people do like to read. I say, whenever I read a document, I've got a habit of putting the speaker on, just so I can get it through a different medium. And it's having that choice. As a learner, I should get that choice. So provide these pathways and gateways. So rather than a set training program, this is what the group of you are going to go through. It's actually, here's the opportunities. Individual-led learning, yeah, essentially that's what I'm talking about. It's about the individual taking control. Because people go to college and they go to university and they learn a certain way. They can go to their lectures, they can go to their seminars, they can go to the library, they get the book of the course. And actually it's free for them to learn. Within training, we say, no, we've got to take you through that. Within learning, it's over to you. They still have to pass through certain gateways to get their qualifications. Short learning events. This is about taking your information, your activities, and actually consolidating those into short, bite-sized, classroom-based learning. Utilize your technology for your information. Utilize your classroom for your application, for your observation, for your tests of learning. Introduce challenge and gameplay. I think that will become more and more prevalent. I still think we're quite a few years away from super interactive gameplay, but I can be challenged on that. And part of the 20 element of it was the network of coaches, mentors, colleagues, referrals, creating your own action learning sets. So with an induction environment, if you're meeting people within a group, you can network, work with them, and later on, you can actually be tested with them. Oh. So what I'm looking at really is, let's not put all our eggs in one basket. Let's actually not go, the latest product will solve all our ills. Yeah? What we're looking at is a pick and mix approach, and that's particularly with induction. So to challenge your thinking, to actually get people to think about learning rather than training. And the last point that I really want to make is that it's a bit like if somebody's walking through a desert and you come along and you've got some food, nice hot sticky fudge pudding, and you ask them for food and you insist that they eat the food. That's a bit like training. Yes, you can have a few bits, but you'll want a sip of learning. You'll want some of that refreshing quality learning liquid to actually refresh yourself. So, have I got any time left? A couple of minutes. Any other questions? Any questions from anybody? Yeah, sure. I would say it's about varying the mediums. So you have people that like to reflect on information. In fact, years ago, I ran a training class, 12 people in the training class. I asked a question, nobody answered. And I thought, my God, they hate me. And after a little bit of time, I worked out that all 12 of them were reflective in learning style. So of course, they're not going to answer. They're too busy thinking about it. There is. And this is where, and perhaps that's where you've hit the nail on the head, is that actually training departments, they take their a step back, they become learning providers of opportunities. Looking at that paradigm and say, okay, what do different learners need? Because we don't learn at the same speeds, we don't learn in the same way. Some people want to spend a long time on the system, some people are very quick, they want to play, they want to actually press the keyboard, they want to see if they can break stuff. And it's all about providing the options for people. Well, I trust, if nothing else, you found that interesting. Something to think about on a Tuesday afternoon. If you are interested in having a chat with me, we're just over on stand 34. And just like to say thank you very much for listening.